All right, council, I'll call us to order at 8, looks like, or sorry, 6:46, I guess it is. Don't have the motions here in front of me, so I guess I'll need a mover and seconder to approve tonight's agenda on the in-camera special council, please. Councillor Saunders, Councillor Mayotte, all in favor? That is carried. Does any member of council have a pecuniary interest in this session? Seeing none, we'll move along, and I guess we'll need a motion to move into in-camera, and I'll read the motion and then look for a seconder, and mover and seconder. That in accordance with the Town of Penetanguishene Procedural Bylaw 217-86, the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene move into an in-camera session to discuss labor relations or employee negotiations. Special council minute notes follow-up from January 10th, and MEA remuneration proposal 2017-2018 follow-up. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Rawson, Councillor Lauder, all in favor? That is carried, and we'll get that door shut so we can go in camera. Okay, I'll try and wrap this meeting up without you. Stacy, I'm going to wrap up the in-camera while they're getting more chairs. Okay. So for council, the final motion in front of us from our in-camera session special meeting is moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that staff be directed to move forward with the proposed framework outlined within this staff report. Any comments, final comments, questions on that? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And moving on to agenda item number 5, which is question period from the media and public. Seeing you weren't in the room for this discussion, I'm pretty sure there's not going to be too many questions. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn at 7:02 p.m. Councillor Rawson, Councillor Mayotte, and all in favor? We are adjourned. Well, folks, we'll just take a second. I know the staff are going out to get some more chairs, and then we'll get the meeting going for you. Alrighty, so we'll get ready for our council meeting to start, and I guess the first order of business will be bigger council chambers, apparently. So welcome, everybody. We'll try and get some more chairs for you. So I'll call us to order for a council meeting just shortly after 7 o'clock. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out here tonight. Our apologies. We've got a good crowd here. We'll try and get some more chairs in as we go along. Council, if you can join me in the council commitment, please. We are grateful for the many gifts which have been bestowed on Penetanguishene and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask that all in attendance and those who could not be here to assist us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you all for attending. And I've lost the motion here. I'll need a mover and seconder for tonight's council agenda on item number 3A. With council's indulgence, so with the planning meeting, I'd like council to maybe move up to item number 6, the presentations. We do those first, and then we go into the planning meeting, because I think the planning meeting will take considerable time, and our guest for the presentations would probably appreciate being moved forward. So I see nods with that. So mover and seconder for tonight's agenda, Councillor Rawson, Councillor Leroux. All in favor? That is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Does any member of council find themselves in a pecuniary situation in tonight's session? Seeing none at this time, if you find yourself in that position as we move along, let us know and we'll address it appropriately. And so we'll jump ahead to item number 6, which is presentations, and we have 2 presentations tonight. The first one is a check presentation to Crime Stoppers, and I'll go up to the front desk here for it. Thanks, Stacy. So for Crime Stoppers, I guess we approached, I guess it was last, budget season, and Crime Stoppers approached us, and I think it was Dave Hobson's idea at one point in time, anyways, who came up with the great idea that, if we could help Crime Stoppers out by donating about 50 cents per household in the town of Penetanguishene, that would equal in around $2,000, that would really help Crime Stoppers deliver some of the good work that they do for us. And the beauty of Crime Stoppers, like a lot of volunteer organizations, they always say, those that can do more, volunteer. And they do incredible work for us, and they're here tonight to get this presentation, and we raised the flag there, a couple of weeks back, part of Crime Stoppers Month. But what impresses me of this group and all our volunteer groups is not what you do tonight, because this is one day out of 365 days of the year. It's the other 364 days of the year that these people do good work, sight unseen, behind the scenes, out doing what we need to get done to help our community. So a round of applause for Crime Stoppers, if you could, please. And I've asked Councillor Saunders and the Deputy Mayor to join me here. They're on our Police Services Board, so if you could join me for the check presentation. And I know Andrew Ferguson's here, so Andrew, if you could join us. And is George Vadaboncourt here in the crowd? I thought George might be coming. No? Anybody else from our Police Services Board? Well, come on up for Crime Stoppers. And I'll tell you what, before we turn the check over to you, which is important if you want to say a few words and tell us what you do, the podium's yours. You got a good audience, TV and in the room.
Well, good evening. Well, the Crime Stoppers program is totally volunteer, and it's completely anonymous. And we rely on donations from the public, and such as the donation we're going to have tonight as well. And we're constantly looking for more volunteers. So if anybody would like to join our group, we'd be glad to hear from you. So thank you very much.
Here, we can crowd around. Apologize in the back there. Not Dave and I.
Everybody ready?
We're ready. Oh, we've got check rates set up.
Yes, you do.
Here's one you can cash. Thanks a lot. Thanks for all you do for us.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the next presentation Council was really happy to be involved in was Operation Grow. And for those who've been watching the newspaper, Operation Grow, the Huronia Transition Homes, bought the old liquor store in Midland, downtown Midland, and they converted it into this Operation Grow that actually is a vertical farming undertaking where they grow mostly produce-related items. But what's unique about it is the fact that the transition homes, it created a very creative way to take women who've experienced domestic violence and sought shelter and some support from Huronia Transition Homes. Now this Operation Grow allows them to go into a safe and caring work environment to get back into the workforce. And they've got a sales counter, and that sales counter actually allows the women to start to socially interact with society again, and again, a very safe and comfortable manner. So, I mean, well done to this group for very creative thinking, very creative thought process to come up with this facility. And beyond that, they address some food insecurity issues while they're thinking this. So they're helping women who have experienced domestic violence, solving some food insecurity, because if you go there, and I've gone there and got the lettuce, and I can tell you, A, it's affordable, and B, it's really, really good. If you haven't been there, go try it. And, it's fantastic. But the other thing that they did with this, and what the council was investing in here tonight, was to help with the certified kitchen. So it's got a community kitchen that's totally certified. So that allows some of our vendors who sell their wares, their jams, or the jellies, or the soups, and you can only sell in a certain vertical if you don't have that certified kitchen. This certified kitchen allows these vendors to actually go into a certified kitchen and actually expand their opportunity to generate revenue for their business. So again, well done. I can't say enough about good things about you folks. So Haley, if you want to come up and say a few words, and then a round of applause for a really creative group.
Hi, we want to say thank you so much to Penetangwishing Council. Unfortunately, Kathy Willis, our executive director, couldn't be here today because of a family emergency, but she wanted me to extend her thanks. We've been in Simcoe County, in North Simcoe, serving women in Penetangwishing and Midland for over 30 years at La Maison Rosewood Shelter. We've served thousands of women in our shelter, in our sexual assault center, and we have finally created a project where we're not only providing immediate assistance to women who are fleeing violence, but we're building opportunity, and we're making a space where women can change and build a brighter future by addressing issues of isolation, food scarcity, violence against women, and building community with peers. So we want to thank you so much, and through our community kitchen, it will become our drop-in space, because we know by sharing a meal together, we share a whole lot more, and we can build connections that will really change our lives. So thank you.
You're our next.
That's the important one. Thanks again. Thanks for all you do. All right, so now we'll get into the public meeting, and I think this is where most folks in the room are looking forward to. So I'll just read the procedure so everybody kind of understands the rules of engagement. So this is a public meeting under the Planning Act to consider an application to amend the town's zoning bylaw. For council, the purpose of this meeting, a public meeting, is not to engage in debate regarding the merits of the application, nor is it intended to be a question and answer session. It is simply to provide an opportunity for the public to make make comments, and for council members to ask clarifying questions. So it's your opportunity to help council reach a final decision on this. So we're here to be educated and encourage you to share your thoughts with us. For you, for the public, this is your opportunity to speak, and we encourage you to do so. In accordance with the Planning Act, if a person does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed or an approval given, you will not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board, which is the OMB. You may not be added as a party to a hearing on an appeal to the OMB unless, in the opinion of the board, there is reasonable grounds to do so. So at this point in time, I'd ask our Director of Planning, Andrea Betty, to introduce the application, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council and the public. This is, as the mayor mentioned, a public meeting under the Planning Act to consider two applications. The first one is a draft plan of subdivision application, file number 2013-01. The second is a zoning bylaw amendment application, file ZA 8/2015. So the purpose of the application is to facilitate a residential subdivision on the area of 221 Fox Street, which is bounded by Church Street, Fox Street, the end of Beck Boulevard, as well as Jury Drive, and the associated zoning bylaw amendment, which would put appropriate zone provisions for that new subdivision in place. So I can confirm that notice of the public meeting was given to the public within 400 meters of the subject site, 400 feet of the subject site on January 3rd, as well as to the requested or required agencies. In addition, a notice sign was installed on the property in accordance with the town's policy. To date, there have been several submissions, some of which council will have on desk tonight. They were emailed out earlier. So we have 3 agency comments from Simcoe County District School Board, the County of Simcoe, as well as Enbridge Gas, and then approximately 30 public comments, which council has some of. Some came in after 4:30 today that I will be sending out as well. So I can confirm that notification in accordance with the Planning Act has been given.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for that. And I'll look now to see if the applicant or the agent wish to make a presentation or to provide some information. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, member of the public, and staff. My name is Celeste Phillips. I'm a land use planner, and I'm here this evening to present to you the 2 applications that have been filed for 221 Fox Street. David Walter is with me this evening. He's the engineering consultant that's been working on this project, and he's here, and as the mayor indicated, if there's points of clarification, we're here to assist with those comments. So, as most of you know, the property is located south of Broad Street, east of Fox Street, and west of Church Street. It's within the built boundary of Penetanguishene, and that's important terminology because that's a term that the province uses in Ontario to encourage development within built boundaries of municipalities. The surrounding uses are all residential, and the topography generally falls from east to west. The property size is just under 30 acres. It's 12.01 hectares. And there's a small portion of land, I'll get to in the next slide, that is owned by the town and is currently landlocked. So we have on the board here a larger copy of the plan of subdivision we can put up if anybody wants to refer to it. But as Ms. Betty has said, there are two applications, an application for subdivision approval. That was an application that was deemed complete under the terms of the Ontario Planning Act in December of 2014, and an application for rezoning, and the rezoning implements the proposed plan of subdivision, and that notice of complete application was issued in December. The proposed plan of subdivision, I'll provide you with some details. The dominant feature is the northerly extension of Beck Boulevard. The road allowance for Beck Boulevard currently exists. This plan proposes a slightly changed alignment of Beck Boulevard so as to avoid a mineral ash wetland, which is located in this area here. So originally, Beck Boulevard was to go straight through in a north-south alignment. The plan is showing a slight deviation so as to skirt the edge of that wetland. The plan consists of 89 single detached lots. Those are shown in yellow on the plan. The minimum frontages are 12 meters and a minimum lot area of 320 square meters. But I can advise that is the smallest of the lots. There are many lots that exceed those standards. The owners are requesting permission to minimize the impact of garages, which is a common complaint in land use planning. And so they would like to recess the garages to 6 meters from the front lot line and bring the habitable portion of the house to 4.5 meters from the front lot line with a lot coverage of 40%. And that's more in keeping with the new urbanism standards that we have in the province. The plan also proposes a block of land identified in orange in this southwest part of the plan, which is proposed for medium density use, which would be 28 townhouse units. And that block of land would be subject to a holding provision and also to site plan control. The proposed stormwater management pond, the environmentally sensitive lands, including the wetland, and the steep slopes along the back of these lots here, as well as this area here, would all be zoned environmentally protected. And also there'd be some open space lands, and there's also a walkway shown through to Fox Street. This is what we refer to in planning as a modified grid pattern with crescents and cul-de-sacs, which allow for a variety in lot sizes. So there have been a number of technical reports that were submitted in support of the applications before council. These reports, I understand, are available for review in the town's planning department. There is a functional servicing report and stormwater management report prepared by David Walter's firm, and he's here this evening for clarification purposes. There's also been an environmental impact study, an addendum to that, and the environmental work has been peer-reviewed by the town's environmental consultant. Typical in this part of the province, a stage 1 and stage 2 archaeological report has been done, and that involved detailed test pitting of the site, and no archaeological artifacts were found. There have been geotechnical reports, a hydrogeology report, and more recently there has been a bat survey, and discussions are ongoing with the Ministry of Natural Resources regarding the bats. In addition to that, a planning justification report has been filed, as well as a review of the community design manual. So prior to making a decision on a planning application, Town Council needs to be satisfied that the application conforms to provincial policy, county policy, and municipal policy. So I will provide a very brief overview. The key documents from the province are the provincial policy statement, which was issued in 2014. That document advises municipalities to look at planning in Ontario where a range and mix of residential uses are permitted, to encourage development within existing settlement areas, and to the document shows a preference for development to take place on full municipal services, which is sanitary and water rather than septics and wells. The Places to Grow document, or the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, that is a document that was reissued by the province in 2017. And in this document, Midland Penetang is identified as a primary settlement area in the county. And it's an area where growth is to be emphasized. And in particular, the 2017 growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe takes an intensification first approach. Intensification meaning build within the existing boundaries of the municipality before you expand to the outside of the town limits. That document also promotes higher density targets for municipalities, a lot of emphasis on what is referred to as compact urban form, and again, a reference to full municipal services. Going down from that, the County of Simcoe official plan is the next document. It was approved in December of 2016. It builds on the documents that were issued by the province. It also gives priority to growth in primary settlement areas such as Midland, Penetanguishene. And again, it encourages development within the built boundary, so within the built boundary of Penetang. And then there's the town's official plan. These lands are designated neighborhood residential in the town's official plan, so there's no amendment required to the town's official plan to allow development to take place. So a full range and density of housing options are permitted within that neighborhood residential designation. And then the zoning bylaw, as part of the discussion this evening, is a request to change the zoning of the lands. The lands are currently zoned deferred development, and so the request is to rezone the lands to allow for residential use, open space use, environmental protection, and medium density use. So the lands, the area that is identified in green would have the environmental protection and open space zoning, and that represents about 33 or 34% of the property. So half of the land would be developed for residential use, about 34% for environmentally protected land, and the balance would be used for roads. The density of development here is quite low. It's 3.9 units per acre, or 9.7 units per hectare. And again, full municipal services would be extended through this property. I would like, Mr. Mayor, members of council, just to take a few minutes to address a number of concerns that have been raised by area residents with respect to the environmental work that has taken place on the property. So reference has been made in a number of the submissions to the urban woodlot assessment that was done by the Severn Sound Environmental Association in 2008. And that document and that work was to provide input into the town's 2008 growth management strategy. And that was being prepared at the same time. So the work by the SSEA provided a ranking, as many of you know, of this wooded area. And they ranked this area as it related to other wooded areas in the town of Penetanguishene. So these lands received a high ranking and were identified as Site 21, with recommendations that a tree preservation plan be considered as a condition of development approval, and that tree cover be preserved on the steep slopes, which is what is being proposed here. So no changes were made to the land use designation of these lands that came out of that study. The lands remained as neighborhood residential in the official plan. So the permitted uses include the underlying designation, which in this instance is a neighborhood residential. Excuse me just for a minute. And in terms of a more detailed evaluation, the owners of this property, Queens Court Homes, retained an environmental consultant, a well-regarded firm known as Michalski Nielsen. They evaluated the property and they conducted field surveys, not just once, but over several seasons, over several years. And they came to the conclusion that the majority of the surrounding area was in fact part of a larger woodlot at one time. And the wooded area on the Queens Court lands is really a remnant of a once a substantially larger forested block. So they concluded that there are, as would be expected, existing and ongoing stresses for wooded areas within municipalities. They examined plants, and birds, and amphibians, and determined that there were no species at risk. On none of the animals that they found are on the species at risk list. This is not a significant woodland as defined in the provincial policy statement. All of the vegetation communities are common and abundant in the town of Penetanguishene. Similarly, the wildlife habitat are all common to the broader area. So they came to the conclusion that with the development that's taken place to the south of this property, that this wooded area is now entirely surrounded by urban development. And as one would expect, there have been impacts to the wooded area because of the urbanization. They talked about the uncontrolled stormwater that flows in from the east. They talked about runoff from construction activities to the south. They talked about a large number of trails that are located in the wooded area, used by ATVs and bicycles. And of course, with trails comes people. There's been bicycle jumps, tree forts, and lots of use of this area by neighborhood children. The plants that are in this property, they noted that there were a number of aggressive, what they refer to as aggressive exotic plant species that wouldn't be native to this particular area. And those exotic species, once they're brought in, they outcompete the existing native vegetation. So the future plans of the municipality include the extension of Beck Boulevard through this property. And this remnant woodlot would essentially be bisected by the extension of Beck Boulevard. The environmental reports concluded that this woodland is in a state of transition and is actually diminishing and declining over time. So this work done by Michalski Nielsen was then submitted to the town, and it was subjected to peer review by the town's environmental consultant, which is Beacon Environmental. That was done in 2015, in December of 2015, and there were updates to the environmental work, and it was peer reviewed again in November of 2016. And coming out of the review by the town's consultant was a list of recommendations for approval of the development subject to certain conditions. For example, as I mentioned, the preservation of the mineral ash wetland, the preservation of the steep slopes. There was some talk about installing drift fencing along Beck Boulevard to prevent amphibian movement onto the roadway. So those types of recommendations came from the peer review of the environmental work. There was also reference to the need for a woodland edge management plan in this area here, as each of these lots would have environmental protection zoning at the back of them. There was some discussion that there needs to be an edge management plan here so that this area does not become part of the residential development of the lot, but it is preserved in an environmental category. Butternut trees are on the endangered species list. There was a survey for butternut trees and none were found. The recommendation coming out of the environmental work is that a further survey be done prior to development, just to ensure that there are no butternut trees on the property. So in summary, I guess I would say to you that these two applications have been reviewed in terms of the provincial policies, the county's policies, and the town's policies. There has been extensive environmental work done by the proponent, and that environmental work has been reviewed by the town and deemed to be acceptable. So I would suggest to members of council that what is before you represents good planning, conforms to the planning policy regime, and I'd ask that you give consideration to approving the development.
Thank you very much for those comments. Any other comments, or you're fine?
David, unless you want to say anything about the servicing?
Not at the moment, but
Nope.
if there are any questions, of course, we're open.
All right, so we'll turn it over to the public here. So at this point, if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to make comments in opposition or in support of the application based on land use planning issues relevant to the application, I ask that you come to the podium. Please state your name and address for the official record. So for our folks in the audience, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you.
And Michelle, if you could just make sure the green light's still on. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jason Cronin. I'm a resident of 26 Drummond Drive. That's basically at the intersection of Church and Cambridge. And I want to thank you for the presentation. But my concern is the impact that adding 90 more units is going to have on the value of my house. Obviously, given the supply, we've waited a long time to see our property values finally begin to increase in a significant manner, and I'm afraid that this is going to devalue my property.
Thank you for sharing those comments and concerns. Anybody else from the public wish to, please, welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name is David Taylor. I live at 22 Drummond Drive. I have a question for council, really, and that is the only access to this subdivision is Beck Boulevard, either from Broad, from Broad, or on the south end from Hunter, okay? Beck Boulevard right now terminates at Fox, picks up again at Hunter. Does the town have any plans to connect Beck Boulevard from Fox through to Hunter in plans that relate to the timing of this subdivision?
Okay, we'll address the question for the record. Andrea will put that in a report for us. Andrea, or do you want to speak to it now?
All right, now let me tell you about my concern, about why, if Beck Boulevard isn't extended, then anybody accessing this new subdivision from, let's say, downtown Penetang or along the waterfront has two options: to go up Hunter, which is certainly not a street in very good shape, or the other is to access it through Bay Moorings Boulevard, which is on private property belonging to Parkview Lifestyles. And I don't know how you reconcile that. I don't know how you can have an access to a subdivision of 117 residences where the public will find it very convenient to use Bay Moorings Boulevard. Not only that, but there's a problem on Bay Moorings Boulevard. Being a boulevard, the lanes in each direction are fairly narrow. The first time a resident parks there or a delivery is being made, nobody can drive by. You can't drive by except basically putting two wheels on there. Now you have the potential for some of 117 residents accessing that way. Also, for 4 months of the year, from June to September, you got 400 people coming out of Kings Wharf Theater on Drury Drive 8 times a week. And Drury Drive's going to go right into Beck Boulevard. How many of those people are going to drive down Beck Boulevard? Now, when we purchased in the village of Bay Moorings, It is not a retirement community, let's call it a lifestyle, adult community. And I'm sure the last thing that the people on Bay Moorings, there are, I think, 10 homes on Bay Moorings Boulevard, and then there's another 4 or half a dozen or so on the corners of the cross streets. I'm sure the last thing they want is to see 8 times a week, 200 cars driving by. In any case, all that, as far as I'm concerned, would probably be alleviated if Beck Boulevard were connected through, because people in downtown Penetang or coming along the waterfront would access Beck Boulevard and drive all the way through without going along Fox, without coming up Hunter, without coming up Bay Moorings Boulevard. For your consideration, actually, I am opposed to the subdivision without that extension of Beck Boulevard.
Thank you very much for your comments, David. Andrea, now that was well articulated. So Andrea, council anticipate that a lot of these questions and answers the answers to his questions will be in your report. Did you want to make any comment now or reserve for the report? Okay, so thank you. We've captured those, and council's expectation is we'll get some clarity on your concerns when we see the report in 2 weeks. Please, welcome.
Your worship, members of council, my name is Robert Stanley. I'm David's neighbor. I live at 30 Drummond, part of the Park Bridge community. I think it was called Lifestyles. Is that what it was? Lifestyles community. I think what I would like to say to council, and without possibly slighting the people behind me, is for anyone who lives here, possibly I could speak to the people behind me, and I think everyone in the room who's lived here for a while, including council, will get it. Come for a drive with me, and I'm going to take you for a drive. We're not talking about Midland here, we're talking about Penetang, but let's be honest, you guys always refer to other municipalities when you're making a decision. Collingwood's done this right, or they've done this wrong. It happens every night at meetings, we all know that. But so, folks, come with a drive with me, and we're going to go from here into Midland, and I'm going to show you a community bordering Bayport Marina that had Toronto money coming up. I'm sorry. A magnificent marina that we all know, Bayport. Development money coming in. Maybe help me here, folks. Could that have been 10, 15 years ago? With these promises of what they were going to do and what they did, due to the fact that either the Toronto developers don't get how slow this market is. They're used to developments being listed in Oakville, the flags going up, selling it in a weekend, and the grass is in 3 months later. That is not how this market works. Bayport Marina, in my opinion, that development, I can't even pick the words what it did to that community. Everyone who drove by it, looking at cable wires, God knows what coming out of the ground, and I'm guessing 10 years. I would then maybe take them up. Everyone knows probably where the Dairy Queen is in Midland on Yonge. And we all know what that's looked like. Is it 20 years? Developers coming in like they did right now, ripping the hell out of this community and leaving it with cable and hydro wires. That's what the people in Midland, is it Yonge, have looked at since, I don't know, the 80s. And what I'm looking at here is prime bushland with possibly a very aggressive mandate to develop this. I hate to make accusations when I can't prove it. You shouldn't do that. But my gut's telling me if the economy turns south, this might be finished, I don't know, let's guess, 2025. Prime property that's been ripped out. And I'm not expecting a comment, but I will say to council that if I was sitting here in your chair and I had, you've got what, 4 years? Maybe 8? I wouldn't want that to be on my shoulder, that I put my hand up and I voted for them to come in and, yeah, there's been some trees saved, but I'm going to say stripped it, and hope that the market goes the right direction and leave the people on the route to Discovery Harbor looking at that for years to come. That's my comment. I'm asking for your conscience, and ask yourself when you put your hand up, is there some truth to this comment that I've just made? Aggressive Toronto developers coming in that maybe don't get our market. They don't quite get it. And that's all I'm going to say. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, this gentleman is next then.
Paul Copeland, 229 Fox Street. Lot 54 and 55 of the development here back onto my property. Those two lots are in the spring a duck pond. Ducks, mallard ducks nest in there and that. And I don't know whether people realize how much water comes into that area. And I think that I'm told there's a drainage system and all that, but I would really like to see a drainage system that if you're going to put drains in, something that's going to drain the area, because it's just not, or you're going to end up with a mess like you did at Bay Moorings, where you're going to take it apart and go across the road and all this stuff. The lots obviously would have to be filled. They'll obviously be higher than my property if they fill them. They'll be higher than several other people's property along beside us. And we've already got water in the back for part of the year. But I don't want water up to my house from the back. I usually have to wait till the end of May to plant my garden, because wait for the water to go down. The other thing that people have to realize is underneath that ground, about 2 feet down, there's hardpan. And the water sits on top of that for months sometimes. Over and above that, I would say I'm told that we have bats, which we see flying around at night. But also, there's another threatened species in there. I believe the leopard frog is threatened. And we have leopard frogs on our property. Actually, I've seen 4 of them this year. And we've actually had 1 rattlesnake, which is also threatened. And I think my main concern is that we're going to get flooded out. And I think that there's some other people that are going to have their lots flooded too. And draining the area is going to be right beside the woodlot. And the ducks are going to be put out of a home, and I have a list here that I'll leave with whoever wants a copy of this, of all of the animals, birds, and different things that we see in our backyard. And I'm not against development, but I think if it's going to have to be done properly, or we're going to have one heck of a mess back there. And the environmental concerns have to be taken into consideration. and before anything is done. And I'd like to give a copy of this.
Thank you, Bob. Yep, yep.
Good evening. Leslie Hanson, 260 Fox Street, and forgive me, I will be nervous. I've put a lot of notes together here, but the first thing I'd like to reference is what the earlier speaker spoke about, which was the urban assessment. And although she did mention that it was gold standard, I don't think she really defined what that means. And under the assessment of that particular woodlot, they talked about gold level sites as being recommended that they should be retained, protected, due to the natural ecological values and for soil stabilization. 7 out of the 25 sites in Penetang were deemed as gold, and this is one of them. A silver site, if we want to move on to that and say, what's a silver site? Well, a silver site requires careful consideration before development. Development intrusion, because negative impacts can quickly, sorry, I'm nervous, degrade the site to lower levels. So if we look at that site, out of 25 potential sites that we could develop in Penetang, this one would be one of 7 that would be considered not suitable for development and more suitable for preservation. More specifically to that site, we can also talk about it being, having a diverse, ecological nature and being a north-south corridor. And to that point, we have no north-south corridor once this goes in. So there are really 2 discussions here. One is about complete preservation, which I think the town would agree that we want to develop, we want to grow our economy, we want to allow more people to come in and move into our, sorry, I'm really nervous, move into our area and enjoy what we've been enjoying. So the first discussion would be protection, and then the second discussion would be reduction of the impact. And I think we can all agree, and one of the earlier gentlemen spoke to very eloquently about the fact that the absorption rate in Penetang is not the absorption rate of Milton or Brampton or Orangeville. The absorption rate here is slow. I drive past the Bay Moorings development. I've watched them sell 6 or 7 houses a year. We've been watching up off Point Street. That development's been, ongoing for years. They might sell 8 or 10 houses a year. Why would we propose close to 100 homes in an area that the province or the Severn Sound Environmental Association has deemed as being a site that should not be developed at all? But if we get beyond that and we say we want to have some development in there, then I think we need to look at some other things. The residents' concerns, the quality of life. Why do people move to Penetang and Midland? If they wanted to live in a subdivision with 40% site coverage, they'd move to Mississauga, because that's where I have a home, as well as my home in Penetang, and that's what our coverage is in Mississauga. So are we working towards being Mississauga, or are we trying to create an environment where young families, retirees can move and have a lifestyle that's not like these subdivisions? So that would be my comment there. The other thing we have to look at is this is probably the biggest woodlot that has had a proposed development of this magnitude on it in council memory. So when we look at that and we say that we've got a gold standard property with very intense development proposed, what does that speak as we go forward? Where does the next woodlot? Does that mean the guy down the road that's got 10 acres, now he's got 100 houses on it? And then the next one and the next one? And then the next thing we do, we look like Mississauga or Milton or Orangeville or some of these other communities that people are moving up here to escape. And the next thing I'd just speak to is the wildlife corridor. Where's the corridor? We're putting 100 homes in here. Fox Street's already busy. I ride my bike down that street at my own peril. Many of my neighbors won't walk there in the evening. It's scary. Now we'll add another 100 households. Is there a proposal to create a corridor right through the neighborhood that residents could potentially use as an alternate to riding or walking or skateboarding or whatever other activities? No. We're cutting the woodland in half. We're making it a complete entity unto itself without any consideration for the lifestyle of the people in the neighborhood. And again, we come back to absorption rate. How many years does it take to build this out? How many years do we have to sit after the bulldozers come in, because this isn't a site like Copeland Creek where they're gonna go in and build one nice little house and sell it and another one and another. They're gonna come in here, strip it, put in services, and they're gonna sell 6 or 8 or maybe 10 houses a year. Or leave. And, I'm not anti-development. I'm the daughter of a developer, and I understand that there's places to develop. And as my father's company built at Hurontario and Eglinton in Mississauga, it was very evident from when Square One was built that that was going to be the part of, the beginnings of a new city. But Penetang is not there yet. So I think it's important with this particular site being the first of gold sites that are being proposed with extremely intensive development for what we're used to up here, that once this is allowed in its current form, we can look across the bay, forget about the trees over off Champlain, because everybody with any kind of land holding is going to want the same. And I can tell you that we did own property over there, and we've now sold it to someone who's planning to retain it and keep it away from that type of intense development. So if we want to continue having nice neighborhoods with larger lots, bigger homes, bats, birds, skunks, wolves, foxes, coyotes, deer. My neighbor saw a moose at Huronia Park, and my friend at the back of the room here saw a deer swimming over from Champlain across the bay to get out at the park to cross the road. So I guess my point is this, is that if the council, in its, in its wisdom, takes this on, I agree with what the earlier gentleman says, that it's, be it on their heads, that they will have to be the ones who said, yep, it's time to start tearing down the forest in Penetang. And that would be a shame when there are other properties, 25 of them, many of which do not have that type of development, or that type of woods on it, where there are approved. I drove past today on Thompson Road. There's a piece of property for sale that already has draft plan approval. It's a wide open space. There's nothing there. Go on in, build. Please come in, spend money at our restaurants, keep our businesses alive, boost our community. But I don't know if this is the place to start.
My name is Lucille Rubbier, and I live at 254 Church Street, and I was just merely wanting clarification on the presentation earlier when we talked about the environmental protection and the preserved lands and tree maintenance. I just wanted clarification on what, I guess, form of policing or, I guess, overall review or I'm not even finding the proper words, but how do you police that sort of preservation? Just looking for clarification on that.
Thank you for that comment. Anyone who wishes to address that at this point? We'll expect to see it in the report as well, but if you feel free.
Yeah, so the blocks that are shown in green on the west side of Beck Boulevard Extended, in this location here, all of those blocks would be conveyed to the municipality. So they would become municipal ownership. This portion of land here that is in green does not abut Church Street. So it would remain in private ownership with the individual lots that are attached to it. So what would, my expectation is that the environmental consultants have recommended this edge management plan for this property. And I would think that, I think the recommendation coming out of the report is some sort of a split rail fence to define the boundary between the residential lot and the area that would be preserved and zoned environmental protection. So again, these blocks here would be dedicated to the municipality, zoned open space and environmental protection. These lands here would have an environmental protection zone on them, but they would be part of the lot in front of them. So these are quite deep lots.
Okay, so, no, the podium, please. Yeah, it's not a question and answer session. You can speak for or against, but it's not an open debate. We're just here to listen.
My question is then, the municipal green lots, do they become an offer to the town to either keep them as green space, or you take the money from the developer for them, which is what happened at Park Bridge? There was an allotted green space that the municipality, I guess, is offered, and then what happens is you have the choice to take the money from the developer or keep it as green space. Is that what those green blocks are to the left?
So I'm looking at our
No?
planner. So Andrew, would that be included in our report? I don't want, we're
Okay.
going down a question and answer.
All
I don't
right.
want to go down that slippery
All I
slope.
want to say is Penetanguishene is very unique little village we have happening here. And why do we want to become like the rest of the farmland towns? You know, we have trees here and lots of wildlife that we see every day. Where are they going to go?
Sorry, just for the record, I didn't catch your name and address.
I'm sorry, Linda Bridges, 16 Drummond Drive, Penetanguishene.
Thanks, Linda. Any other questions from the public? Please come on up. Sure, the gentleman and then the, ladies first, how's that? Seems like the appropriate approach.
Kathy Chamney, 237 Fox Street, Penetanguishene. Couple things I want to speak to. One of the ones is in the environmental impact statement 4.2.2 in regards to the eastern peewee. It is right now not, I'm like Leslie, I'm a little nervous. It is not on the endangered species list right now. But according to the studies I've done, or what it said, that it's possible that it might. And one of the things that it actually said in the study itself was that, it may be a special concern or may end up being threatened. So what it says in 4.2.2 is that there are indications that this bird is quite resistant to habitat changes, fine, including the removal of some trees. So some trees is not a whole woodlot, in my opinion. So I don't think that's really being addressed. We live on the lot that's backing onto the cul-de-sac at the north, I'm directionally challenged, northwest, thank you, yeah. The lot that's going to be behind us is going to be approximately 36 feet by 63 feet. I didn't move to Penetang to be in this, I came from Thornhill. That's not my choice. I didn't want to be in the middle of a subdivision. Speaking to Paul's concern about the flooding, in the spring, Paul's on the other side, so I don't see him. But on my side, the neighbors beside us, it is always flooded in the spring for a very long period of time. I wish I could have brought some pictures with me. So the town hasn't actually, if these are going to be higher, we're going to have a wet basement. In fact, when my neighbor put in a pool a few years ago, we had never needed a sump pump before. Just that small change, we now have a sump pump that runs all summer long. So I'm very concerned about the flooding in our house, the possibility of that. The density, I think it's just not correct for this particular area. And let's just see what else. That the trees help hold the water in so that we don't end up with the flooding. That's my biggest concern. But I would like to say that council has previously listened to its residents before when they've had concerns. For example, when they had the snow removal at the park across the street, I was very happy that they listened to the neighbors and their quiet enjoyment of the area, and they actually decided that that wasn't a good idea. So I'm really hoping that town council, in its wisdom again, sees that this probably isn't the best thing for Penetang.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to address the council. Reiner Coleman, 244 Church Street. Really appreciate all of the work that so many of the presenters have already put into checking on the possible endangered species and all of that. To a point that several people have made, we only moved up 3 years ago. When we came up from Toronto, we checked out several communities and we looked at growth rates. And when you look at the way many areas around Georgian Bay have just exploded in growth rate, the slow, steady, managed growth rate of Penetanguishene was a real draw to relocate here as opposed to where all the subdivisions are going in. It was not our intention to move into a community where we could reach out the window and shake the neighbor's hand again. So when we look at the density of these lots, the density does not reflect the neighborhood that it's going into. So it's going to change the feel and the tenor of the entire area around it. But those are all very sort of personal reasons, and money is money and progress will be progress. But if we come to a logical point now, we think about the fact that it's already been mentioned that as this woodland's been encroached on, it's put some stress on the animals in the woodland and so on. And I mean, you can walk back there on a spring day or in the summer, and if you get into the middle of that 30 acres, it is absolutely silent except for the songbirds and the crickets and everything else. It's amazing. If you just take a walk back there and sit there, you'd never want to put a shovel in that ground. But, okay, that being said, so as we said, it's under stress because it's been encroached upon. So the answer to that is to rip another 40% of it out and leave an ill-defined area that actually belongs to those unit orders and presume upon their good nature that that woodland's going to survive doesn't make a lot of logical sense. So we know that the town has to grow. I mean, financial-based taxes, all of that is important. We appreciate the good drinking water we have, all of that. But let's not do it at the peril of sitting there and watching the turkey vultures soar at night before they sit down. Again, this is the joy of life. How many of you have sat out on your back porch and watched those turkey vultures just soar and tumble in the air? They're not doing it for hunting. They're not doing it for food because it's like 7, 8 o'clock in the evening during the summer. It's just their sheer joy of flying. That's the sheer joy I have when I hear the crickets and the birds and the frogs and the amphibians. And I know from studying many different ecosystems that the first thing impacted is amphibians. The fact we have so many healthy amphibians back there, there's something working right with the natural watershed we have, and we're going to destroy that if we put this in.
Thank you, Reiner.
My name is Eric May. I live at 20 Grew Crescent, which is to the west of the Grew extension at the corner of Hunter and Grew. I don't know if this meets all the criteria for a development. I'm really not in favor of it, but I'm not going to rehash what everybody else has said. My concern goes back to the second person that was up here, and that's traffic flow. We've been living in there for the last 7 or 8 years while our subdivision has been building out with thumping and banging going on forever. I have 2 concerns here. Number one being there should be an entrance off of Fox into this development. I thought that first orange or green thing was a road, but it's a walkway. That's not going to do any good. And if this is approved, I would like consideration given to blocking off back at where the cul-de-sac is right now, where it ends, and block through traffic until this development's finished. So that would take care of the people coming up, because they will all come up Hunter and turn left on Beck. So that's the only thing I would like to see a precondition to any approval.
Thanks, Rick. Anybody else from the public before I ask council if they have any questions? Yes, we got somebody here. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joel Simmons. I'm at 238 Church Street. A number of people have brought up the issues with wildlife, and it's sort of been addressed a little bit. I guess I've got a number of questions. First question would be, waiting to hear back from the MNR on the report. You mentioned bats, something like that. There's supposed to be a report that's coming back. The bats being on the endangered species list that they may have found there, or that they did find back there. If the proposal changes as a result of the MNR's comments, will there be a second public meeting? That's my first question. Also, it appears that the land comprising Block 95, which is at the top there, has the same natural characteristics, so steep slope, treated section or whatever. If it's the same as the rear portions of Lot 12 through 25, is the proposal for Block 95 to be owned by the town, which I think it is? And if so, why are the rear portions of lots 12 through 25 not proposed to be owned by the town? So that would be my second question. Third question is, where is it here? Sorry, I'm trying to be as prepared as I could be. I guess not a question, this is more of a comment. I guess I just feel that, and this has already been raised as well, monitoring the protection of the environmental lands on lots 12 through 25. I guess I feel it would be better if it was actually owned by the town, so that could be preserved rather than left to the landowners to actually do that. Another comment I guess I just have, or a question I would have, is many of us here have already said that we kind of use some of this space here. This is more of a kind of an active transportation question. Is there any way that there could be some sort of infrastructure, I guess, put in place to allow for residents on Church Street who use this area and kind of get through the little Block 92 through to Fox Street and the Huronia Park, which is there? Modifying the infrastructure to allow for more active transportation, because I know someone mentioned that Fox Street is really busy, to promote active living in the area, getting people out and using bicycles and walking and running and things like that, modifying the plan to actually allow for more of that type of usage. So is this proposal it, or is it open to modifications, I guess, is my question too.
I saw everybody diligently writing down your questions, so I look forward to the answers in the report. Does anybody else from the public want to speak, please? A couple more? No, yep. Yep, so we've got two more that I see for sure, so that's good okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martha Hood. I live at 35 Broad Street. And my concern is, with the way it's set up, Jury and Broad, and then the connection with the new road of Beck Boulevard coming into there. I don't know how many of you actually are on Broad Street very often, but it is super busy during the day. And we have the stop sign at the end, which connects with Fox Street. And then we have the straight through at Church. There's stop signs onto Beck from Church. But when the jail gets out and when the hospital gets out, they go whipping down that street so fast. I can sit and watch. They just go. They do on Fox as well. It gets very, very busy. So will we be putting in traffic lights, four-way stops to slow this traffic down? Because then with the new subdivision being put in possibly, there's going to be more traffic. That's a very, very busy spot. And like someone mentioned earlier, with King's Wharf, all that traffic that comes out. And then they have in October, they have their festivals. I have seen traffic parked in front of my house for a half hour, an hour, waiting just to get in, to park. They park along the roads to get in, and they walk. I've even thought myself, I'll charge $5 for people to park on my grass because there's nowhere to park. So my concern on My street, Broad Street, is the traffic and the speed that they take on that road.
Thank you, Martha, for those comments.
Evening,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Mayor and Council. It's my first time ever speaking at something like this, so also nervous. Josh Warner, resident and homeowner of 268 Church Street. I moved here December last year. Just wanted to clarify a couple comments that have been made by the previous speakers and some other people. The first is, it was mentioned by the first speaker that this woodland, she stated that it was not designated significant woodland by the province. That's significant because right out of the environmental impact assessment, it says development is not permitted in significant woodlands unless it has been demonstrated that there will be no negative impacts on the natural features or ecological functions of the woodlot. And that's in reference to land that's been designated significant woodland from the provincial policy point of view. Now, I'm not saying it is, but she said it isn't. Also, in that environmental impact assessment, it says, in summary, this woodland does have attributes which could lead to its determination as significant in accordance with the provincial policy statement, but which equally may not qualify it. Excuse me. And this is the important part. It says, the town of Penetanguishene can only make a determination of its significance in consideration of this woodland size and character in relation to other woodland areas within the entire municipality. So just to clarify, from what I understand, it's up to you guys whether it is actually deemed significant woodland. Also, there was a comment by the same speaker that there was no threatened or endangered species found in this woodlot, which, from my understanding from reading, as I'm sure many people have read because it's circulating the same way it got to me, this letter to Graham Findley of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, in which, and this was written by SLR Consulting for the developer, the northern myotis, which is the long-eared bat, I believe is its common name, which is an endangered species, says the northern myotis were confirmed with certainty to be using the woodland during emergent surveys. The other endangered species that was observed is the little brown myotis, the little brown bat. Out of this same report, or letter, sorry, to the ministry, it says the little brown myotis was also recorded within the woodland, with pulses recorded later in the survey after emergence. It's my understanding. Anyway, the point is, it definitely is record of endangered species. It's my understanding, reading through the Endangered Species Act, that this letter is an attempt to get the ministry to provide an exemption for the developer for requiring a permit because the endangered species have been observed. Because if not, they would need to get a permit, which would restrict their method of development. That's all I know about that. Also to thank you. To follow up on another resident's comments, which he said much better than I can, but the previous speaker on behalf of the developer was commenting that these woodlands are stressed and there's been encroachment. And much like the earlier resident said, I don't see that as a reason to tear it down. If anything, that's a call to action that we need to carefully consider the actions that got us into this, that have stressed the woodland, right? And doing this, tearing down the forest, is only going to not only destroy this woodland, but further stress the other woodlands in the area. If I may, I'd like to just read the letter that I submitted in opposition to this, because gathering my thoughts on the spot, my nerves fumble my words. So kind of to start over here, my name's Josh Warner, and I'm a resident of Penetanguishene and homeowner on Church Street. I'm opposed to the proposed Queens Court development for the following reasons. This development will destroy many trees, plants, and resulting animal habitat. It will impact, which means kill and/or displace many animals, including 2 animals identified as endangered species, and degrade the character and quality of the neighborhood and town. I started writing a much longer and wordier letter on why I'm opposed to this development and expanding on the reasons above, but then going through the documentation surrounding the issue, realized that you, the town, already have the information regarding these issues, and that I need not repeat them for you in this letter. I decided then to write this much plainer letter focusing on the decision that ultimately needs to be made. Reading through the environmental impact study prepared for Queens Court developers, the Penetanguishene Urban Woodland Assessment prepared for the town of Penetanguishene, and the letter from SLR Consulting to Graham Finley of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, it is abundantly clear that this proposed development will destroy this diverse, mature woodland that is home to many species of plants and animals, which include several rare and uncommon species, as well as 2 endangered species. The environmental impact assessment mentioned above concludes that, quote, while the interior habitat is not abundant within this woodland, all of it will be lost. The 6 area-sensitive birds which have been identified within this woodland are unlikely to persist. A number of the more mature trees associated with the woodland will be lost, and along with these, the cavity nesting opportunities these provide. While a majority of amphibian breeding habitat will be retained, some will be lost. There will be a substantial reduction in the overall quantity of wildlife habitat provided by the woodland. Also, the letter to the ministry mentioned above seems to indicate that if this proposed development is approved, there are no alternatives to the destruction of the endangered species habitat located in this woodland, and that, quote, the entire woodland is contributing to the habitat necessary for the females, their young, and males to carry out their important life cycle requirements. In addition to, and as a direct result of these impacts to the environment and the natural landscapes, I believe this proposed development would degrade the character and quality of the neighborhood and town, which stated in Penetanguishene's Community Design Manual, quote, the natural landscape of the region possesses a visual and physical character that creates its distinctive quality. The patterns of the riparian corridors, wooded areas, rolling hills, cultural landscapes, and shoreline areas create the natural identity of the area. Nature is an especially key part of what defines Penetanguishene, providing visually attractive, habitat-rich areas and comfortable spaces in which to spend leisure time, with many physical linkages to the natural environment is existing through open spaces, shorelines, and trails. Having trouble breathing. This sentiment is stated again in the town of Penetanguishene's official plan, which states that the town, quote, owes no small part of its charm to trees and hills, and the preservation of these is considered imperative. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I wasn't actually finished. I was thanking him for the water. I'm almost done. Bear with me. I apologize for taking so much time. Thank you. Sorry, this sentiment is stated again in the town of Penetanguishene's official plan, which states that the town, quote, owes no small part of its charm to trees and hills, and the preservation of these is considered imperative. Having considered moving to this area for several years and finally purchasing our new home on Church Street and moving to Penetanguishene in December last year, what attracted us to this area was a major factor in our decision to purchase our new home on Church Street was the natural character and quality of the neighborhood and the town, the appreciation and enjoyment of which I believe is shared by the majority of the town's residents. As a conclusion to this letter, I would like to quote the following excerpt from the Penetanguishene Urban Woodland Assessment that was provided to you guys. Quote, "The tree coverage of Penetanguishene creates a pleasing and welcoming atmosphere to the town. Current research is investigating the connections of a healthy community with available tree cover. Lessons are to be learned from the other municipalities that have reduced their tree cover to a minimal and are now trying to reestablish forest cover for shade, ecological enhancement, and aesthetic appearance. Rebuilding a forest takes a great deal of time, effort, and funding, whereas retaining a forest is an exercise of forethought. The town of Penetanguishene has an opportunity to put into effect a long-term strategy of protecting and enhancing their urban woodlands and ensuring the healthy biodiversity currently found within our community." End quote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Graham Coulter, 266 Church Street, right next to Josh. So, I've kind of been bringing this to the public's attention on Facebook also. Seems to be quite a few people concerned. I couldn't make it tonight. We'd need a bigger room. So, I remember years ago I had come across the official plan in draft probably about 5 years ago, and went door to door notifying people of the subdivisions that intend on coming through here. At that time, people, it's not immediate, so people aren't too concerned until a plan like this comes out. So I did write a letter. Just looking at this, I didn't, you guys already have the studies, I didn't touch much on that. Just looking at this, it's just like they use a cookie cutter to cut it out of the woodlot and hoping that it survives the preserved areas, which being in such a tight little area now I don't know if that area that's supposed to be preserved will stay. Just about the notification of this meeting. Since that says Beck Boulevard, and the official plan is proposing it to go all the way through to Beck, that's obviously what their intentions are. That other area is Site 19 on the Severn Sound assessment, which is also gold zone, which, depending on who's looking at it, they determine what gold means to them. But anyways, that will likely be torn down to put the road through for that. And also, since this is proposed, I would think that those people should have been notified also. The people surrounding that other extension of Beck Boulevard. So, but that won't come until after this was to go through, and then it'd be another meeting just like this. But it's that whole area, just because Parkbridge has a section in there dividing, it's really one woodlot. So, I'll just take out some points out of this. I'm writing a letter to express my opinion and concerns for the subdivision. I apologize for being a long-winded and quirky letter. I may sound a bit like a tree hugger. I realize there's been a lot of time, money, and discussion regarding the development of this land with pressures from the county and provincial lawmakers. I realize that draft official plan includes the road being put through this property. However, we already got to that. As a child, I traveled north from Essex County every summer to wooded areas, such as areas like Penetanguishene. We had great times, but for me it was the nostalgia of the smell of the forests, as we only had 4% of the trees in Essex County left. And now that the ash borer's been through there, it's probably less than that. My brother married a girl from Penetang who we would come to visit, which brought back the northern nostalgia for me and the natural heritage that Penetang has, which caused me to relocate and to love Penetang. During a visit, I remember catching my brother's dog on Church Street and looking around and thinking, what a beautiful area of town, or what a beautiful area to live. And that, where I caught him, was right across the street from where I currently live. A little more than a coincidence, maybe. I wasn't drawn to Penetang by the facade that's crumbling or the minus 30-degree weather. It was the forests and the atmosphere that this town has. If you grew up in an area such as this, you may take it for granted. Or if you come from an area that has no trees, you really learn to appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of other residents, I'm a paramedic, and I usually ask people where they're from, or how long have they lived here. And they say, oh, I moved up from the city, had to get out of there. You know, and then if we're putting subdivisions in like this, it's really not much different. Much of the province is still tearing down trees and building expensive recreation centers with the tax dollars generated instead of keeping up urban woodlands which we could use for recreation and mental health. We're one of the lucky residents to own 3 acres in the corner there, which is mainly tall pines. We have a large amount of wildlife through this bush. We've seen everything from deer, fishers, coyotes, gray frogs. We had mallard ducks nesting. And actually, when I went to, we put an addition in years ago, and we ended up pushing some of the dirt into the bush. And Mama Mallard wasn't too happy about it. She came up to us, up to our big machinery, and was hanging out right around us. So I followed her out to the bush, and I had to uncover her nest. I've got pictures of it, and we ended up relocating her about 30 feet away, where she raised them and fled off with them. But that's all it took, was a little bit of soil pushed into the bush. The pileated woodpeckers and the porcupines and the grouse, they're here. They're not in Essex County because they don't have the trees. There is porcupines that spend all winter up on the top of those tall pines in behind us. They spend all winter for years and years. Every year I go back there, they're still there. They won't be. They're right in the middle of that. Looking at this plan also, the reason they need that density is because of the slope. And they wouldn't be profitable enough putting larger lots on one side of one normal street. So they pack them in there so they're a development company with billions of dollars, from what I've read, who they're affiliated with and the owners. Actually, they're from Kingsville, right down where I'm from, or their father was. They're worth billions of dollars. They own stuff all over North America. They'll be in and out of here with their pockets full, and with nothing left to build this town. At least you've got Parkbridge. They're putting in other things. They're running a condo association, which contributes to the town. The size lots too. Okay, you got 12 meters. You got 4.5 meters to the house. Where are you putting that snow? Where our house is right now, because of the trees, the snow drops straight down, and it sits on my roof. Not a snowflake blows off all winter. So if you've got trees on that side too, trees on that side, it's dropping straight down. Where are you going to pile that? You've got nowhere to put that. It's not like a condo association that can pick it up and take it away and move it to a different location. Actually, our house, our property there, we've got geothermal in the bush that heats our house. Little lines that I went around all the trees, and we ended up digging a trench to put the heat in. That's what heats our house. We're talking about the forest and how it's being damaged in that. Well, you got talking about tree houses and ramps, and that's kids being kids. We're lucky enough to get them outside these days. At least they're out there having fun and getting exercise. I realize it is private property, but kids will be kids. Yeah. Sorry. I was told that this woodland was clear cut in the 40s and 50s. I've got a picture of my house being built in 1950, and you can pretty much see town dock. There was a man that lived across the street from me. He said he would deliver meat by horse and buggy along Church Street. And he said the wind would blow your hat off. It was just like on top of Hilltop. So when you talk about winds, or even if you go up to Burns Crescent, the wind that comes up there. So you whip down these trees, how are those other trees going to still stand? They're not rooted to withstand these winds. Like, I'm worried about our trees falling down if that's going to be torn down behind us. Because they're just the tall, skinny pines anyways. They're just going to blow right over. And I have our neighbors dump all their leaves and branches and everything else in the bush. And I'm sure that happens all the way around instead of having a truck carried away. Other people have asked me if I'm ripping down our bush, and I tell them no, and they say, oh, everybody's so thankful that other people that have moved in around me. So that's always a big concern to people around there. Like I said, Josh just moved in. They were on their way up to Wenda, and they love this area. They love the trees and the sense of community. He asked me before he bought if it was going to be developed back there. I guess I didn't give him the right answer. I wasn't accurate on timing anyways. I'm not an environmental expert, but I do believe that destroying this woodland provides a strong enough positive. I do not believe that destroying this woodland provides a strong enough positive impact to the town, but potentially damaging economic impact if we keep this up. I realize that the province is pushing for smaller lots and do not believe that our town is in dire need for such neighborhoods. I don't feel that we need another Artelia Road. We put all the stop signs on Church Street to force everybody out to Fuller, and that seems to have helped with much of it. Maybe a few more on Fox by the sounds of it. So I'm in the medical field, and just like in that medical field, antibiotics have solved problems, but now we're finding out that they wipe out the gut habitat and are now trying to backpedal and solve problems left by antibiotics. I feel that tearing down this forest is the same thing to do with our sensitive habitats, and someday we'll be backpedaling trying to recreate these habitats. We're borrowing this land from our grandchildren. We can be the people to give it back to them without ruining it. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
My name's Tim Bionker, and I live at 19 Grew Crescent. A couple things that were brought to light tonight that I wasn't aware of. And this is the question to council. If there's not going to be Beck Boulevard access, and if I look at that drawing, it doesn't look like there's any Broad Street access to the development as of yet. And if I understand correctly, I've been around here a few years, there's a landlocked lot there off Broad Street. So if they don't have access, the only access they'll be able to get in this development is Hunter, which makes no sense at all. Progress is going to take over, and we know that. So perhaps there's a compromise in here somewhere with not so many tight-fitting lots. The other issue tonight I learned is that the green belt on the right side of what we're looking at is going to be owned by the people that will purchase those lots. From a selling perspective, real estate perspective, that's a great selling point. Not only are you getting your building lot, you're going to get all that green space. Who's going to, and knowing that green space, it's all very hilly. A lot of vegetation stops that from coming down. what happens, who's going to police the people that do buy those lots and stop them from developing some of that property behind them? It doesn't take much to cause a problem. The other issue too is I think we know there may be some future development on Fox Street not far from that development, and that may very well have to be taken into consideration as well before approving something like this. I think I'm all for progress, but I think maybe that whole plan, the numbers in there have to be reworked a little bit. And if the town can't give them access from Broad Street at Jury Drive or from Beck Boulevard, if the town's not prepared to push through and put those roads in, the only access they'll have is Hunter. And that just doesn't make sense. So I think the town will have to work with the developer and do something there. And I think maybe the numbers of these lots has to be lowered significantly to address everybody's concerns here. And finally, on a final note, I just want to say that council's done some things in the past, actually thought out of the box in a lot of projects. You don't sort of follow the cookie cutter thoughts that other municipalities do. Good example of that is your Main Street, how you're going to do with the Main Street development. There's going to be some pain for some people, and we all know that. But this council went above and beyond, listened to their citizens, and went above and beyond to make the pain as less as they could, and put safeguards in place. So I only hope the council does the same with this project too, and spends the same amount of time they did in the Main Street project looking at this one here too. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Good evening. I'm Derek McGuire, 228 Church Street. Just a couple of comments to council and one objection. Comments are thanks to the people that did all the research and brought it to us tonight. One speaker eloquently pointed out that there are at least 24 other sites wouldn't be considered gold that would be more appropriate for development of this type. Another pointed out the high density, which we're not Ajax and we're not Whitby. It doesn't look like Penetang. And my final point is just that I strongly object to the point that we would leave that entire environmentally protected area in the custody of or stewardship of 14 individual owners with little, if any, oversight. The plan should not go through if that's the case. At the very least, Penetang should own that property so that we have one point of stewardship that we can trust. What do you think will happen when the first of the 14 starts encroaching backwards up the steep slope and taking things down and putting things up? The other 13 will be soon to follow. So I think that is my strongest objection. At the minimum, Penetang should retain that property in their possession and stewardship. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any final?
I noticed this drawing doesn't have the...
I'll get you to go to the microphone so we can capture it properly, Graham, please.
I realize this drawing doesn't have the slope put into it. It would be nice if we had a picture of that. A lot of the properties along that back onto that steep slope is right in their backyard. If the recommendations were to keep the slope treed, wouldn't that slope be involved? So obviously it's going to turn into lots though, and that's a pretty steep slope.
Thanks, Graham.
They wouldn't have enough room to put that second street through otherwise though.
Thank you. Looking at the audience, I think, one more? Yes, please. Thank you. Welcome. Can't quite see down there.
I'm Jessica Simmons from 238 Church Street. Just quickly, I wanted to say a couple of things. We moved up here, and I'm assuming like a lot of you, we were looking for a place with green space around and in our own property. And when my husband and I came to look at houses, we had kind of looked all around the area, Midland and Penetang, and this was one of the last properties we were seeing. And we beat the real estate agent there, and we walked into the backyard, and we just thought, oh, who cares what the house is? This is where we want to be. This is where we want to live. And on our property on Church Street, we have pine trees that are so big you can't fit your arms around them. And our children love it. And I know it's private property, and there's trails back there and jumps. And the neighborhood uses it to walk down to the lake, and it's wonderful. But I am concerned about that green space being privately owned. If the other green spaces aren't, I don't think that it decreases the lot value to leave it in the town's possession, as well as all of the surrounding areas, for if this development does go through, which I'm not in favor of, for that to be kept as the town's property, to increase everyone's value, but as well to be able to use it and protect it and to keep it for our children. On the kind of children and our grandchildren's note, we have 4 kids, and I wish that I would have had them come tonight, or at least write something, because they're very upset by this too. One of our daughters thinks that we need to move now if they're cutting down our forest, and you know, we're torn by that. We moved here because of what Penetanguishene is and has, and the beauty in the trees and all of the systems and the animals. It's been very life-giving to us, and I think that's why a lot of us live here. And I feel like to kind of rip it down and replace it would mean, yeah, it's not going to feel the same. It's not going to be the same for any of us.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, one more thing. The space being kept by private landowners, that whole hill, and it's a really steep hill, we hike it and snowshoe it and everything, it's all sand there. And so when he was talking about the wind and the trees, all those huge trees there, if you clear out in front of it, are left on a sandy hill, and they're not used to any of the wind. So I do think that even if we want to leave it protected, we will lose a lot of the trees from the wind and things that comes up from the lake, if it's cleared in front of it. That's all.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. So I think at this point, we'll go to the applicant if you want to have any concluding comments, and then I'll turn it to council to see if they have any questions at this point.
Mayor, members of council, and members of the public, I have been taking notes with the comments made this evening, and certainly we'll take those back to the owners and meet with Ms. Betty and report back to you.
Thank you very much. Council, does any member of council have any clarification questions at this point? Okay, seeing none, then we'll anticipate the report. So I thank everybody for coming out tonight and for your participation. The council will consider the application and the results of the public meeting at a future meeting. Andrea, when will the report be coming, and when will this come back to council so our audience is aware of when to anticipate information arriving?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I do hope to have this on the March 12th agenda of the Committee of the Whole.
Right, so March 12th, so Stacy,
March
that
12th,
would be printed March the 5th then, the Friday? I'm just looking for the date. So what happens, it comes out the Friday before the Wednesday, so start to look for that on which Friday, Stacy, please? I just don't have my calendar up in front of me, sorry. 7th, yeah. Yeah, some simple math could help me with that, I guess. Oh, so the meeting's March the 14th? So March 9th, the information will be on the town's website, and March the 14th, which is Wednesday, it'll be in front of council for consideration. So thanks, everybody, for coming, and for council, we'll take a 5-minute break to allow people to clear the room. Thanks. All righty, council, I'll get us back to order here. Stacy, can you just step out and give Doug? Now we're looking for Brad. There we go. We got him. We're good. All righty, council, I'll call us back to order here. And so the next item in front of us is item number 7A, and it's moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that the following minutes of council meetings be confirmed and adopted as circulated. And that's Special Council, January 10, 2018, Council on January 10, 2018, and Committee of the Whole, January 10, 2018. Any errors, comments, omissions, notice on those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Then all in favor? And those are approved and carried. I seem to have the same one twice for some reason, so I'll get rid of that. Moving on to agenda item number 8, matters for consideration. And the first one in front of us is moved by Councillor Ross and seconded by Councillor LaRose. The council enter into a letter of agreement with Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Transportation, for the provision of gas tax funding for the town of Penetanguishene Transit System, that a bylaw for contribution agreement be brought forward by staff for council approval. Councillor Ross, do you want to speak to this, please, or have Brian?
I think Brian came, this is a renewal of last year's agreement since our transit began for our piece of the gas tax fund for transit.
Good. Brian, any comments? Good. All right, council, any final comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That is carried. 8B, it's moved by Councillor Lauder, seconded by Councillor Mayotte, that this report be received for discussion and staff be directed to prepare a report for the next Committee of the Whole meeting to address any comments received at tonight's public meeting. I think that's pretty clear for council. We just had the public meeting. The comments come back up. We need to make comment on this? Okay. March 14 is not the next Committee of the Whole, is that?
I could speak to it, Your Worship. Perhaps a little amendment to say at a future public or future Cal meeting.
Okay. Thank you for catching that, Councillor Lauder. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 8C, moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that the CEO report 18-01 regarding the next steps of the final service delivery review report be received for information, and the staff be directed to proceed with option number 1, which is the creation of a new ad hoc committee, SDR steering committee, with 4 members of council and 2 community members as appointed by council, and that the clerk put out a call for applicants for 2 community members to join the ad hoc SDR steering committee. Councillor Saunders, do you want to speak to that, or to have the CEO address that?
I'd like to do both, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much.
It seems to me that there's a tendency on our part to be increasing the numbers of these ad hoc committees and involving people in the community. I'm not sure it's necessary. I think with the input from staff and their recommendations to council, council is quite capable of passing any appropriate resolutions. But I would very much entertain comments from our CAO in that respect.
CEO, please.
Through you, Your Worship, committee will recall, or council will recall, that the request was made by committee back in late November, to come back with some options with respect to the creation of a new steering committee, as per se. After giving it some consideration and discussing with some colleagues, I did put together some options for council to entertain. I do think that there's certainly merits and not with respect to creating an ad hoc steering committee for this purpose. as well as I think there's some merits and not with respect to simply utilizing committee of the whole in that role, which essentially is option 3. I'm really at the, I'm really willing to proceed as committee or as council would like to proceed. But my recommendation is to proceed with an ad hoc steering committee where it might give an opportunity to vet and have a little more of the informal conversation in advance of coming to committee of the whole, and perhaps have members of committee that are experienced and do have the knowledge of the organization that might be able to vet some things before it does get to this table. So ultimately, that's my recommendation, but I don't think there's really I don't think we can lose by proceeding with any of the options that I've presented.
Councillor Saunders?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. If you would entertain a friendly amendment to the...
Oh, turn it off, okay, thank you.
To the resolution, identifying option 3 instead of option 1, I'd be far more comfortable with option 3. I find that Committee of the Whole has worked well for this this council, and I see no particular reason to go in a new direction.
Okay, so option 3, council, do it as committee of the whole. I'm seeing general consensus that that's probably the way to go then. All right, any other final comments on option number 3? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that is approved and carried. Thank you very much. Now we're on to item number 9, which is presentations of consideration of reports from our last committee of the whole. And the first one in front of us is moved by Councillor Leroux, seconded by Councillor Mayotte. The recommendations contained within the committee of the whole report related to Recreation Community Services section be approved. Any member wish to pull any of these items? I do wish to pull the item on the arena, if I could, please. So I might pull that one out myself. Anyone wish to pull any of the other ones? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote on the balance. All in favor? They're carried. And in terms of the speaking to the arena, Deputy Mayor, I'll turn the chair over to you.
So I have to find the report, Your Worship.
I'll just have comment if you would.
Okay, so what was before us was the recommendation. Should I read the recommendation and then you would speak to it, or would? I can just speak to it. Okay, speak to it then.
Thank you very much. It was just consideration for council, just to give you an update from Roma. So the Minister of Infrastructure and the Minister of Tourism shared with me that the federal government has $407 million identified for new sports complexes, cultural centers, libraries and the like, and that the province is looking at actually matching dollars for that fund, so that 407 turns into $814 million available to municipalities who are looking to build something new. So it strikes me that as we go down the recommendation, I don't disagree with any of the thoughts. I haven't got myself a firm position on this yet, but it seems to me we'd be remiss if we didn't have our staff at least talk to the province, understand what that funding envelope looks like, and what if we get an arena for two-thirds off, we'd be probably remiss in at least not understanding what that opportunity looked like. But I'm looking to the clerk here and asked Stacy earlier today, and I hadn't heard back. Stacy, is that a motion does it take a motion for council to reconsider? Because I know when we talked about the arena last time, we directed staff not to pursue brand new. In light of this new information, would I need to be proposing a motion to reconsider to have staff include a report back to council on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that through our discussion this morning, the Director of Recreation can correct me if I'm wrong, but the motion actually read that it was just about the focusing of the report, and the report was to exclude the consideration of a new arena. I think that if it were a matter of a decision of council, meaning more than just direction of council in terms of how the report was prepared, it would be a motion to reconsider. But given that there's extra information, I don't believe that it would require a motion to reconsider just because it was direction in terms of preparation of the report.
Yes, Your Worship. Do you want to-
So in terms of procedurally having council look at this, do I need to look for a seconder to, or mover or seconder to include the option of pursuing information or seeking information on the new grants available?
I think currently there is the motion that was passed at the committee meeting was actually referred back to staff, and it did provide further direction to our Director of Recreation to provide additional information. So the motion actually wasn't passed.
No, it's indicated here, referred back to staff, so that could be added to staff, or at the next meeting, someone could bring forward a notice of motion.
If council agrees that today that they would like the Director of Recreation to include that in the future report, then that would be, that item could be directed to include that today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Saunders?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. There are times, and our mayor is in the fortunate position of being involved provincially in a lot of different ways, that he catches information that the rest of us might not, or he might not if he were not in that position. The larger issue for me in all of this is there are times, not necessarily convenient for this council, that a level of government will release grant information, new grants, and I think it's, from my own point of view, I rely on our CAO and his staff to keep on top of that kind of grant information and bring it forward to council so that we can deal with those kinds of issues and the kind of impact that is potentially there and deal with it in an orderly fashion. I think all of us from time to time hear this, hear that, but what is important to me is that we have an orderly method of dealing with this kind of information as it becomes available. Now, I know our CAO very, very much is involved in this kind of thing. I know our mayor, because of his various associations, is also involved in this, but I think it's appropriate for this to come through an agenda process so that we can, in the future, always consider these kinds of information as they become available.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Is there further discussion? This item has been referred back to staff, so certainly there will be more information that will come forward. So I think it should stay there. That's a consensus. Yes, Madam Clerk?
Yeah, absolutely. It's still going to be referred to staff, and I don't think we need to change the disposition of the motion. It's being referred back to staff, but I think what would be good for council to agree upon, as well as for the Director of Recreation to understand, is whether or not she's being directed to now include the information brought forward by Mayor Marshall regarding the grant opportunities and what it would cost to build a brand new arena. So she needs to just make sure that she includes that so that when she does bring it back, the question doesn't arise again, unless council doesn't want her to pursue that.
Well, I would ask, yes, Councillor Saunders.
That's precisely my point, Madam Chair, is that I don't believe this should require any kind of direction from council to our staff to delve into these kinds of matters. I personally rely on our CAO and staff members. If a government agency releases some new grant regulations, then for goodness sake, look into it. You don't need an instruction from council, in my view, to cause you to look into that kind of thing. I would expect that this is going to come back to us with this additional information without any need from our point of view for some kind of direction. I trust our CAO, I trust their staff. You know that we're after every available legitimate dollar that we can find. So if you come across information, be it from the mayor or anyone else, by all means include it in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Leroux?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Councillor Saunders in every respect. However, there is still that part that exists where council has indicated that we were not to look at a new arena. So I think we have to bump that out in order to look forward. We can't, if we've already said before that we don't want to look at a new arena, well then, it's still there.
Chair,
Saunders.
that's my whole point, is that this council can only make decisions based on the available information. And we made a decision. Now, if our staff, all of a sudden, our CAO finds that there is new information that he wants to bring back to us in order that we might consider that new information, I would hope that happens automatically, Doug.
And again, I agree with you, Councillor Saunders, but the fact of the matter is that we said that we would not entertain a new arena. So I think council has to say, yes, if there's something out there, we will entertain a new arena.
Yes, Madam Clerk, you did make a statement a few moments ago about the actual legislation, so could you repeat that so that?
So just to clarify, and I think to make everything a little simpler, Councillor Saunders is absolutely right. This is something we would normally do, except for the fact that we were directed specifically otherwise. We don't need a motion to reconsider because it was just simply direction. Time to time, I think council can steer staff instead of us going down a path and spending a lot of time on discovering and researching. The council can direct us to not do that, and I think at that time that happened. I think the environment has changed. I think we're seeing and what I'm hearing is if the council directs staff to then do spend that time other than from previous direction, then that's what our staff will do. But on a normal circumstance, I think we would have provided that information.
Thank you. Yes, the climate has changed, and certainly if there is monies available, certainly it would be prudent on behalf of staff to bring that information forward. So I do believe it will stay as is, and we will look for a report in the future. Turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I'll resume the chair. So the next one in front of us is 9A, and it's moved by Councillor Lauder, second by Councillor Mayotte, that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to the Planning and Development Services section be approved. Anyone wish to pull any of these items for further conversation? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And those are approved. Moving on to Transportation and Environmental Services, moved by Councillor Ross and seconded by Councillor LaRose, that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to the Transportation and Environmental Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these items for discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Then all in favor? And those are carried. Moving on to agenda item number 10, presentations, consideration, or reports from special committees. We have none. Motions of which notice has been previously given. We have none. Notices of motion. Does any member of council have a notice of motion to bring forward tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 13, which is consideration of the bylaws. It's moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene introduce the following bylaws: 2018-03, 2018-04, and that the bylaws be read a first time, deemed to be read a second time, a third time, and carried. Any member of council have any comments on either one of these two bylaws? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Then all in favor? Those are approved and carried. Moving on to announcements and inquiries. I think we have a couple. I'd ask maybe announcement to our Director of Recreation Services, Cultural Services on Winterama, maybe an opportunity to broadcast that to our citizens, please.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, Your Worship. So we're celebrating our 70th anniversary of Winterama, one of the longest running winter carnivals in the province. And that will be Family Day weekend. So we will kick off again this year at Discovery Harbor with fireworks and a celebration at their skate trail. We have the same arrangement in place as we did last year, is that everyone can get in and enjoy the venue with the purchase of a Winterama button. So generally that's an $8 entry fee. So for $3 you get your button, and then you get into the rest of the festivities for the weekend. We're looking at bringing back some of the favorites of the past. So I know a big highlight is certainly the Demolition Derby on Saturday. So everything will be focused down at the town dock and on the main street. And we are always looking for volunteers to help support our event. So I encourage anyone who's interested in helping out and supporting and getting involved to contact myself or Marlena.
Thank you very much. And maybe ask the CEO or the clerk on 13 ways to kill your community. That's coming up on February 8th, I believe.
Thank you, Your Worship. On February 8th, as His Worship has mentioned, beginning at 7 o'clock p.m., The 4 municipalities, in conjunction with EDCNS, the Economic Development Corporation within North Simcoe, have partnered together and are hosting a session at the North Simcoe Recreational Center in Midland, where a gentleman by the name of Doug Griffiths, the author of 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, will come and speak to the community. There's 200 seats that were opened up to the public, given our numbers constraints at the facility. I think the last I heard, there was over 100 tickets that were reserved, and that was in a matter of about 4 days. So tickets are going fast. I would encourage the public to get onto the EDCNS website through Eventbrite and set aside a ticket should they wish to attend. I'm told it's a fantastic presentation, and he travels the province and I believe even the country, giving these presentations for the benefit of the communities and municipalities.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Any other announcements? Councillor Rossin, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's just an inquiry, and I don't expect a response now. It's to Brian. I just wanted to bring it up. We had a public information meeting a while ago regarding Ojibwe Landing, and there were some questions from the public regarding lab results when they be released to the public and the like. I'm just wondering if we may know that, and if we don't know tonight, comes back next week, that's fine. And my second question is to Brian. Do we have an idea when the next public meeting will be regarding Main Street? There was tentative discussion about a February timeframe, so I'm just wondering if we have an idea on that. Again, I threw him under the bus time. I meant to talk to him before, but if he doesn't have that handy, next time I just don't want to add it as a referral item.
Thank you through to Councillor Rawson. The Ojibwe Landing is the site characterization or the lab results for the additional site investigation work that was completed. Is a referral item under T&E, and that will be brought forward in the first quarter, so I'm expecting to bring back that sometime in March and do that as a public information session so that the public can see the results of the site characterization, and so that members of council can also see the results as well. And as far as the Main Street reconstruction public information session, we're targeting the week of February 19th for the Main Street reconstruction meeting. So once we have a date set, we'll obviously let the residents and the business owners know via a mail out, social media, and the website as well.
Thank you for that. Any other announcements? Councillor Leroux, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question back through to our Director of Recreation, Sherry, being asked by quite a number of people exactly where this demolition derby will be held down in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Leroux. It will be held where the boat and trailer parking occurs down by the launch ramp.
So is that big pile of snow going to be removed for that?
It's my friends in Public Works are going to be strategically relocating that snow to accommodate the event, yes.
Can we ask where?
Yes, through to Councillor Leroux, we're actually going to be using some of the snow for the actual arena where the demolition derby is going to be placed. My understanding with our meeting with Sherry and the organizer of the event, they utilize snow as about a 4-foot snow bank around the arena. So we're going to be utilizing some of the snow for that. And also we're going to be using snow for some of the other events. I think there's a bit of a hill going to be placed down there too for toboggan as well. So we're going to be utilizing a lot of the snow there too as well. And the polar plunge as well.
Okay. Another inquiry, Councillor Rawson?
You can announce it, but it was about the next meeting's not here. I think it's at the museum.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, we did talk about that and it escaped me. So our next council meeting will be actually at our museum. A regular start time is 7 o'clock, and that's on February 14th, Valentine's Day. So something sweet and different for everybody. And I understand staff are bringing chocolate hearts for council is what I've heard as well. So maybe that was just a rumor, but yeah, February 14th at the museum, 7 o'clock. Thank you for that, Councillor Rawson. Any other announcements or inquiries? Okay, seeing none, I did skip over item number 14, which was question period for media and public, but there was no media and public, so I kind of looked around and just went along. But anyway, so now we go to the confirmation bylaw, which is item 16A, moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that the confirmation bylaw 2018-05 be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. And all in favor of that motion? And that is carried. So council is adjourned at 9:20. And we'll go right into our committee of the whole. So I'll call us to order for the committee of the whole. And I need a mover and seconder for tonight's agenda, please. Councillor Rawson, seconded by Councillor LaRue. Any comments or questions on tonight's agenda? Councillor Saunders? Nope. All in favor of the agenda? Okay, we're carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Does any member of council have a pecuniary interest in any of the items before us in committee of the whole? Seeing none at this time, if you find yourself in that spot as we move along, let us know and we'll address it appropriately. Agenda item number 4 is presentations and delegation, which is for all sections, and we have none tonight. So we'll go on to section number 5, which is transportation and environmental services. And I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Rawson, please.
Thank you, Worship. 5A is our consent agenda. It's recommended the following consent agenda items have been given due consideration be received. For information, we have 2 items. The Midland Penetanguishene Transit Committee minutes dated September the 19th, 2017, and the Midland Penetanguishene Transit Ridership Monthly Update for November and December 2017. Any member wish to pull any of these items for further discussion? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. It's encouraging to see that our ridership has gone up again. So I just wanted, because the last report we got, it showed that there was a large reduction in ridership, but we're gaining again, so that's good news. Thank you. It's just a comment.
Do any members wish to pull any items for further discussion? A mover. Councillor Mayotte, seconded by Councillor LaRue. Call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Item B is matters for consideration. The first one is our SCADA Instrumentation and Control Engineering Maintenance Agreement for Water and Wastewater Division. It's recommended that council enter into a maintenance agreement with Aramosa Engineering Incorporated for provision of SCADA and Instrumentation and Control Engineering Services for the Water and Wastewater Divisions of Public Works Department, and that the service rates outlined in their maintenance renewal letter dated December 15, 2017 be approved for the 2018 calendar year, and that a bylaw for the maintenance agreement be brought forward for council approval. A mover. Councillor Rose, seconder. Councillor Roux. Discussion. This is standard contract. We've done this every year for several years. Seeing none. Call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. Do any members have any additional agendas to add or remove? Seeing none. It's recommended that the Transportation Environmental Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. A mover, Councillor Rose, seconder, Mayor Marshall. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Question period for the media and public. Seeing none, back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. And go to item number 6, section B, Recreation and Community Services, and I'll turn the chair over to Councillor LaRue, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Consent agenda is recommended action that the following consent agenda items having been given due consideration be received for information. Correspondence from the Community Heritage Ontario support for federal action on the conservation of heritage properties. Questions, comments, or concerns? Mover, Councillor Rose, seconder, Deputy Mayor, all in favor. Thank you. Matters for consideration, transfer payment agreement, OMCC grant. Recommended action that the Corporation of the Town of Penetanguishene enter the transfer payment agreement with the Ministry of Transportation for the Province of Ontario as presented by the province, and that the clerk bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. As council may remember, back in June, we directed staff to apply for the cycling strategy grant, and in December, we were informed that we got the $25,000 grant, so now we're just requesting that we make arrangements with the Ministry of Transportation for the transfer payment agreement. Questions, concerns? Mover, Councillor LaRose, seconder, Councillor Mayotte, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Referrals to upcoming agenda staff referrals. Any to add or delete? Mover, Councillor LaRose, seconder, Madam Deputy Mayor, and all in favor. Thank you. Question period from media and public, there's none, and back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. We'll go over to Section C, Planning and Community Development Services, and we'll turn the chair over to Councillor Lauder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item A, consent agenda. Recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given the proper due consideration, be received for information. Downtown Improvement Committee Minutes, December 6, 2017. Any questions, comments? A mover? Councillor Rose, second. Councillor LaRue? All in favor? Carried. Matters for consideration. Site plan amendment, application SPA-18-01, and the zoning bylaw amendment to remove the holding H symbol ZA 1/2018, 139 Champlain Road. Recommended action that an amendment to the site plan approval be granted to the property at 139 Champlain Road, file number SPA 18-01, subject to the final approval of the engineering design. Can I have a mover to get it on the table? Councillor Rawson, and a second. Councillor Mayotte. I'd like to pass this over to our director, and as that is being passed, if you could also explain why the H is not required in the recommendation, the removing of the H holding symbol. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lauder. So as a bit of history, this is a property that has been granted site plan approval by the town and actually has an agreement registered on title for that site plan approval. Through the more formal and detailed design for the building, it's been discovered that they need some additional lands in order to adequately provide for a septic system on the property. And under the, in effect, site plan agreement, it says they cannot make any changes to that site plan drawing without getting council approval. So that's why you see it in front of you now. It is a slight adjustment to their site plan to increase the elevation on some of the lands to keep it above the high water mark for the septic system. The holding symbol is on the property, and so they've made that application as well. The requirement for removal of that holding symbol is actually registration of the site plan agreement. And so with the update to the site plan, with the new registration of an updated agreement, which is most likely just to be a new drawing that's added to the agreement, then the municipality will be able to remove the holding symbol at that point.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Calling for the vote. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Item 2, request for exemption for site plan control bylaw 2014-30 for 45 Robillard Drive. Recommend action that an exemption from the town's site plan control bylaw 2014-30 be approved for an addition of 33 square meters for the property at 45 Robillard Drive. On the table with the motion, Councillor Rose, and second by Councillor Rawson, and second by Councillor Rose. And once again, I'll ask our director for comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lauder. So the town has passed a site plan control bylaw 2014-30. Under that bylaw, that does allow for some exemptions for redevelopment or additions to buildings. In this, in the current bylaw, it says any addition for one building over 10% is required to go through a site plan approval process. So the applicant or the owner of the property approached the town about obtaining a building permit and was informed of the requirement to go through the site plan process, and subsequently submitted the request to council to grant an exception. As you'll see from the staff report, the proposed addition to one of the buildings, the office building on this site, is at 13%, so only slightly above what would have been exempted already by council.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Calling for a vote. All in favor? Carried. Referrals for upcoming agenda and staff. Referrals that the Planning and Community Development Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agenda and staff. I'm looking for any changes, additions, deletions. Seeing none, if I can call for a mover. Councillor Rawson, and a second. The mayor, thank you very much. Once again, discussion. All those in favor? Carried. Questions from the media and public? Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, go over to section 8, item 8, section D, Finance and Corporate Services, and I'll turn the chair over to the Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under consent agenda, we have no items, so I will move directly into matters for consideration. This recommended action that council authorize an appointment of an alternate member to Simcoe County Council for the term of the council that appointed them, or until their appointment bylaw is rescinded, or November 30th in the year of a regular election, or until such time as the alternate member's seat is declared vacant in accordance with Section 259 of the Act, and that council appoint to this position, counselor, and at the moment it is blank, as you can all see. We had a lot of discussion about this particular item at our council meeting 2 weeks ago, but felt that not all members of council were present, so that it would come back for reconsideration. Perhaps I'll ask the clerk to give us a little spiel on what this is all about.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So just a quick, brief overview. This is on in front of you today based on our conversation when we spoke about all the changes that were coming from Bill 68, and we talked about the changes in our procedural bylaw. Council around the table, I believe, was interested in having a potential backup for either if the mayor or deputy mayor were unable to attend their county meetings for whatever reason, because the new legislation does allow the county to do that. It's within the county's control in terms of how they allow that, and we have been contacted by the county clerk, John Daly, to let us know how he's handling that. He's requested specifically, this motion is exactly what the other municipalities are using, so that's what we're following suit, and we would also be doing an appointment bylaw specifically related to that. This would allow the county clerk to get aligned and organized with the appointment, because it would require some background work. And I was notified by the county that majority of councils tend to be appointing the highest member who received the highest number of votes behind the mayor and deputy mayor, and it's just something that made it a simple automatic way. Certainly not what this council needs to do. It was just something that was, I guess, the normal the normal thing that was happening. And in this case, I did look just in case council was interested, and it was Councillor Doug LaRue that received the highest number of votes behind Deputy Mayor Dubeau and Mayor Marshall. So for council consideration.
Thank you for those comments. I would also add that Councillor LaRue certainly did sit at County Council some years back, so I would certainly put his name forward. Do I need to put that in the form of a motion?
I think just like any motion, we have an option A, option B. If you'd like to move that Councillor LaRue, then you'd want a seconder for that.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Saunders?
Do you not have to vacate the chair, Madam Chair, if you're going to make a motion?
Yes, sir, you brought that to my attention once before, so one of these days I'll clue in.
I'm happy to nominate Councillor LaRue for that position.
I guess, Your Worship, you're running this part of it because Brad's moving it, so I can speak to it. Okay. I guess we should ask Councillor LaRue if he's interested in having his name stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did actually have some discussion with Stacy about it, and the fact of the matter that I did spend 7 years at county, and that I am in a position to go if need be, I accepted that I would.
Thank you. So I have a mover. I need a seconder. Councillor Mayotte. Further discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Great, thank you. We will move on to number 2, proposed amendments. The recommended action that council approve the attached procurement policy, and that staff be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. Since this was written by Jeff Hamlin and Brian, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The policy that you have in front of you is an update and revision to the existing policy that we currently have in place that was last looked at, I believe, in 2013. Is practice to review our procurement policy every council term, and that's why it's being brought forward to you this evening. There is a number of changes that is being proposed through this new procurement policy, which is outlined in the staff report that you have in front of you this evening. We used a number of different procurement policies from various municipalities in our area to come up and bring forward this policy that you see in front of you today. We used various sections from various procurement policies that we thought were a best practice moving forward for the municipality, and I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you. Are there questions from members of council? Seeing none, I do need a mover and a seconder, so moved by Councillor Lauder. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Mayotte. Further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, okay. All those in favor? Carried. Our next one, recommended action that the Chief Administrative Officer Performance Evaluation Process Policy be approved, and that council approve option for the correlating process of the feedback section of the policy. This policy was brought forward by Director of Human Resources, so I would ask Connie if she would speak to it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report is before you as part of a direction to staff that occurred during the 2017 performance review with our CAO. Council had asked staff to look at some options for the CAO performance process. Currently, we have a process, but it's not documented in any format. And so what the report includes is an actual draft policy that would outline and document the process to be followed for a evaluation of the CAO position. What is new to the process is that I've included a 360 feedback process that could come from direct reports of the CAO and not just council members. And also utilizing tools that are available to municipalities by the Canadian Association of Municipal Administration. This is a new tool that quite a few municipalities are using. A few years ago, the CMA put out a survey to CAOs and councils, and the feedback was that they wanted a consistent tool to be utilized. It's a free tool and can be adapted to meet each municipality's needs. Within the actual policy itself, I'm asking council to select an option for collating and gathering the feedback process. My understanding is last time all of council was involved in providing and conducting the actual evaluation, and that you used the clerk and a director of human resources from Simcoe County. So within the report, I've provided several options. The first one being option A review committee, which would consist of a mayor and 2 council members to work with the director of HR to gather the written feedback and develop a final summary report that's shared with all of council, but just the review committee to meet with the CAO to actually present the final report. Option B would be just the mayor and director of human resources to form that committee. Still to summarize all feedback and circulate to all members, and that the mayor and the chair of finance and corporate services meets with the CAO to present and discuss. And option 3 would be keeping the same process which was used in 2017, which would be bringing a third party in to gather and collate that feedback process. So what I'm asking for is approval of the policy and what format that council would like to move forward with.
I do need a mover and a seconder so we can get it on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor Rawson? No? No one is wanting to move this item forward. Councillor Lauder, seconded by Councillor LaRue. Discussion. There's no discussion, so it is asking for options, and I would suggest option A, but discussion. Councillor Rawson.
Well, I have a few comments and questions. So I'll start with a couple comments. I actually don't like the toolkit. I read the whole thing. It seems like a lot of soft skills and, you know, like this whole process to me is putting Jeff in a very vulnerable position, one that it's open right now, which I appreciate. But at the end of the day, I think we need some hard fact stuff instead of the soft skill, like does he play basketball nice? Don't really care. I would like to look at facts. Like, let's look at a work plan and did he deliver on the work plan? As opposed to, did he tie his shoes properly today? In this toolkit, I didn't see anything that actually referenced, they speak to SMART goals, but did they reference, did he accomplish last year's tasks? And did he meet that benchmark? Like, let's look at this as a balanced scorecard. And if we said you have to hit 80% on all metrics, did he hit 80 or did he hit 60? Let's look at fact-based instead of the soft skill, how you feel in 360 and da-da-da. I also don't agree with, no disrespect to Connie, but that our HR staff is involved. And I'm going to turn to the mayor and the deputy for your feedback. I believe it worked well with the HR from county last year, and I opposed that originally, but after going through that process, I think it was a great process. I don't like the way we ask the questions, but I like that the county kind of helped do that. So I guess I'll ask a question to the mayor and deputy. How was that feedback loop and the feedback loop with Jeff without the details? And then I'd like to ask the CEO, what's his opinion on the process? And I would like to look at more fact-based delivering on a work plan as opposed to soft skill stuff.
Your worship?
I don't mind sharing comments. I thought the process with the county HR staff being involved was great. The only thing I do differently than last time was when we rated the CEO, we did it independent of one another. So I don't know if Brad's 3 was the same as my 2 and the same as your 1. So Councillor Saunders had recommended at the time that when we went through the process with the county, that we actually all get in a room together so that we arrived at our weighted number, whether it was 3 or 2 or 1, and so we all understood what that was. So I much preferred the process last year. Thought it was in depth, but I certainly agree with Councillor Saunders that a collective effort of arriving at our number, so council's number, not Jerry's number, Brad's number, Doug's number, but our number, made perfect sense to me. So I liked it better last year.
And certainly the feedback from those that came from the county was that he felt that it was a good process, that it had worked well. I think you did ask the CAO to comment. If you would comment, Jeff?
Just for clarity, what was the ask of me?
A vulnerable spot. So, you know, when you're asking everyone's opinion on your performance, and then the compilation by HR presenting that with this toolkit versus last year's toolkit with some tweaks. We already know what those tweaks are, but from your perspective and what those evaluative matrices look like.
Through you, Madam Chair, I guess from my perspective, the last year versus what's being proposed this year, I think what we felt was last year's was a little bit, or at least what I felt, last year's was a little bit ad hoc. I think there was things that were done well last year, but I also think there's opportunity perhaps to structure it a little better. I think I'm hearing from Councillor Rawson with respect to goals and, you know, were last year's goals achieved, you know, ensuring that that's incorporated. And I don't think for any, you know, I don't think the intent was to exclude that from this process. I'm also hearing that perhaps the county HR is an opportunity. I think that worked well. There's probably a few things that I might suggest we do a little bit differently, but I do think engaging the county, if that's the route we go from start to finish, to really close the loop, it probably is ideal. At the end of the day, I think we're really, council on April 26th asked for us to return with a revised process based on what other municipalities were doing, and wanted that well in advance of the next evaluation as per se, and that's why we're here in front of council or committee this evening. So I think there were some things that were done well. I think there were some things that perhaps could be done a little bit differently, just from a process perspective and structuring it, having a little more structure to it. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you, Jeff. Did anyone else have a question before I go back to Councillor Rawson? Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I read this as proposed policy, I don't see any reference to a scenario in which there's an accusation against the CAO for being drunk on the job, for making inappropriate comments to staff, for having his hand in the till. And am I correct then that this proposed policy is designed more as a routine kind of almost growth-based process, which is not intended to address at any time, under any circumstances, accusations of inappropriate behavior on the part of the CAO? And if my assumption is correct, then I do believe, in fairness to our CAO, there should be some reference to what happens in the event there are accusations against him of any nature. That's not then just a routine evaluation. And I don't want it to wait for 6 months or a year to be dealt with. And I'm not obviously applying to Jeff, but any CAO, if there are serious accusations against the CAO, what happens?
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Connie, did you want to address that question? Are there
Yes.
other policies in place that would?
Yeah, usually those specific, if there's a complaint against a CAO or any member of staff, that would actually be covered in a complaints policy. If you have a performance issue with a staff member, then I would expect that that's going to be addressed by council to the CAO. But if it's a specific complaint about inappropriate or in breach of a policy or a bylaw or so forth, then that usually comes through a certain complaint and policy process. I don't know if we have a policy. I'd have to double check to see if we have one that pertains to specifically the CAO and how that gets handled.
Connie, further discussion? Councillor Rawson first.
So, again, I still don't like this process. I would actually argue last year's performance evaluation, a lot of body of knowledge that suggests that a 1-year performance review is actually a very archaic system, and it's not actually a good way of performance management. And last year's system, I do recall that the mayor and deputy was charged and tasked with quarterly check-ins with Jeff, and that you would report back to the HR committee on that. So I would suggest that kind of a system and setup through some sort of an ongoing evaluative process is better, and tweak what we have using that ongoing performance management is a better process than coming up with this soft evaluation and let's make it a process like this annually.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Are there further discussion from other members of council? So what are you suggesting? Are you suggesting and making a motion that we stay with the process that we have in place and that we just tweak it? Or how would you like to bring that forward, Councillor Rawson? you're just going to vote now, but what's before us are the options A, B, or C. That we actually just moved the report. We didn't actually mention A, B, or C. So, and I have not called for the vote, so Madam Clerk, could you advise us, please, on just how we should go forward with this?
Well, currently the motion is on the table for discussion. That moving and seconding was what has happened. There has not been an option selected, so we would need a member of council, if they so desire, to select an option and move that.
And if the options that are listed are not preferable, then I would call for the vote and it would be defeated, and then we would come back with Mr. CAO first and then Councillor Louder.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think to try to keep the momentum flowing with this, I think if we can, if to be fair to the author of the report, if she can receive the feedback, and I think she's heard a number of comments and with respect to feedback tonight, if she can receive that feedback and return back with some options for council to entertain, I think certainly from her perspective and certainly from my perspective, recognizing I'm in a little bit of an awkward position, I think having some policy framework, whether it's Jeff Lees in this chair or Bob Smith in this chair, I think having some policy framework would be ideal, but certainly, and I think that's certainly the end goal or recommendation, at least from the Director of HR, but I think if we can get some feedback this evening, if there's additional feedback after tonight, if we can ensure Connie gets that. I mean, to be candid, this doesn't need to be done tomorrow, but I think the goal was to have something in place in advance of coming up to the 2-year mark. So my recommendation or my suggestion might be is that perhaps we refer it back to staff. Connie's heard some feedback, she can get some more feedback and return back with some options that council could entertain.
Thank you. Mr. Louder, Councillor Louder, you did have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. I was going to come to Connie and actually say, have you, listening to what we've heard tonight, do you feel that you can make some changes and modifications in the presentation? And I love that comment. I'd just like to continue on a touch with Councillor Rossins. I feel that throughout the year, whether it be a quarterly basis, is a good measure, but I do feel that the once-a-year review is something that's good, because to me, I actually think throughout the year is more of a soft. It's is there going to be a report made, 4 reports throughout the year by the mayor and deputy mayor on our CAO, or rather the conversation, the light reports, and then coming back once a year with some sort of procedure whereby all of council makes a decision and has some sort of common vote. So my recommendation would be to make some enhancements in this procedure, absolutely, and nothing that we've ever done procedure-wise is cast in stone and then lives forever, so it's always a living document, so we've got to respect that. But I prefer some sort of once-a-year mechanism whereby we do have a formal review.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Louder, yes, I have more questions. Councillor Saunders.
I had a question, Madam Chair. A former boss of mine many, many years ago said that when you're doing something like this, entertaining something like this, make sure you do it in accordance with the current best research on the topic. And so if I had a piece of advice for Connie right now, it would be get in touch with one of the graduate schools in business and find out what their latest advice is, what their latest model is for evaluating a CAO. And I think then you would have likely the free benefit of excellent expert advice.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor.
I'll move to defer.
You will move to defer. Thank you. Second, Ms. Worship.
Just for clarity, we're referring back to staff?
Yes, we are.
No. Okay, thank you.
So all in favor of that?
Mm-hmm.
Carried. Very good. We'll move on to the council illumination for 2018 to 2020. on the trends of other municipalities and their response to the removal of the municipal elected officials' expense 1/3 tax allowance. Connie, you are the author of that report, so if you have something to add.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this report consists of two compensation issues. The first is that whether or not council wants, when we went out to RFP for a compensation review, we did ask for quotes to include council or just to do staff and the library. So we had actually asked for two quotes. So I'm asking here as to whether or not council, recommending that council consider involving the remuneration review of council in the compensation review. The last review was done in 2014, just prior to the 2014 and to 2018 term of council. So being that we're coming up to a new term of council and keeping in line with what was done previously, seeing if we wanted to include council review for the upcoming term. Second component is that currently legislation has passed as part of the federal budget that the 1/3 municipal elected officials expense allowance is going to be removed effective January 1st, 2019. I have contacted a few of the other municipalities. Tiny and Tay have decided at this point not to do anything. As of last council meeting, Midland has approved at council to go ahead and increase the council wages for 2000 and for next term council to what I would refer to as gross up the amount so that the effects of the 1/3 tax allowance are not felt. So in the report is provided a summary of this term of council wage adjustments, also a table of what it would cost to increase the council allowances with the removal of the 1/3 to equal the same net pay.
I do need a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor. Moved by His Worship, seconded by Councillor Leroux. Discussion. So there's no discussion. I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried.
Referral items that the Finance and Corporate Services section endorse the following.
No, I keep turning it off because there's a hollow. I will begin again. That Finance and Corporate Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. And if there's no items to be added or removed, a call for, I need a mover, Councillor Rawson, seconded by Councillor Louder. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Your Worship, back to you.
All righty, and I'll look for the ever-popular motion to adjourn. Councillor Rawson? Oh, sorry.
Your Worship, could I just indulge council for a moment? I'm asking perhaps that we should consider sending a card of condolences to Randy Bidon, our Officer of Animal Control, on the loss of his 24-year-old son, who passed away today from battling cancer for some number of years.
Be happy to do so on behalf of council, absolutely. Before we do adjourn, I just, Stacey, just noticed that at council, we didn't do Finance and Corporate Services. It was caught up in the paperwork, so we never asked council to approve those items. So is it better to, no, I didn't actually get caught up in the, so it's better to just refer this to the next council meeting when staff can pull it? Okay, sorry, my apologies, got caught up in the paperwork. All right, so motion to adjourn. We have Councillor Rawson, Councillor Leroux, all in favor. We adjourned, I think it's at 9:57 p.m. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
No more public meetings like this, eh? Carrie. No, we're done. I knew it was going to be a big one. That's what, yeah, I've been like all week people at my front counter. I hear you, I do. But you gotta understand, the municipality has some objectives. We've known about this being a road allowance for years. So, it's tough. I get